What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? It's Daniel and welcome back to our video. Today I'll be taking an updated look at the 2025 Daytona 500 entry list. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into it. We're going to start by talking about the one car for Trackhouse Racing. This is of course be driven by Ross Chastain. Ross Chastain will be looking to win his first Daytona 500 in 2025 and has been close to winning the Daytona 500 multiple times over the course of the last couple of years. He's a pretty solid super speedway racer, won a Talladega in 2022 in the spring. He looks to win his first Daytona 500 as he came close to winning it in 2024. Up next, how about the two car for Team Penske? This is once going to be driven by Austin Cindric. Austin Cindric will be looking to win his second Daytona 500 in 2025 as he won it back in 2022. Austin Cindric is one of the most underrated super speedway racers in the field, and I think he's got a really solid chance and opportunity to get his second Daytona 500 in 2025, considering the fact that Team Penske is really strong at super speedways. I think Cindric's got a really good chance to win his second Daytona 500. Up next, how about the three car for Richard Childress Racing? This will once again be driven by Austin Dillon. Austin Dillon will be also looking to win his second Daytona 500 in 2025 as he did win it back in 2018. Austin Dillon is someone who's usually up front at super speedways along with his teammate Kyle Busch, and he always usually qualifies pretty solid on super speedways as well. I think Austin Dillon does have a solid chance and opportunity to get his second Daytona 500 win. Up next, how about the four car for Front Row Motorsports? There'll be new driver behind the wheel of the number 4 in 2025 as Noah Gragson will drive the 4 car for Front Row this year. Noah Gragson has won a Daytona and NASCAR Xfinity Series competition back in 2019 or 2020, and Noah Gragson's also won races at Talladega as well when he drove for Junior Motorsports. We think he'll have a chance and opportunity to win his first ever pole. His Front Row's qualifying track has been good. Noah Gragson looks to win his first career NASCAR Cup Series race. Up next, how about the 5 car for Hendrick Motorsports? This will once again be driven by Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson is looking to win his first Daytona 500 in 2025 and has come close multiple different times, including in 2017. This is a one super speedway race where Kyle Larson generally runs really well, and I think Larson has a good chance and opportunity with the Hendrick Motorsports equipment. He's gotten better at super speedways in the next gen era as well. I think Kyle Larson could potentially finally become one of the few people that have won all 4 Crown Jewel events. He looks to win his first Daytona 500 this year. Up next up, the 6 car for RFK Racing. This once again be driven by Brad Keselowski. This is the last major crown jewel that Brad Keselowski needs to win. He's not won the Daytona 500 before. Brad, though, is one of the best super speedway racers in the field. Yes, he's one of the most aggressive super speedway racers in the field, but Brad is a really strong super speedway racer, and I think that Brad is going to have a pretty solid and strong opportunity to finally win that first Daytona 500, especially with the fact that RFK Racing is expanding this year. He looks to win his first Daytona 500 in 2025. Up next, how about the 7 car for Spire Motorsports? This will once again be driven by Justin Haley, who will run his first Daytona 500 with Spire Motorsports. Justin Haley is one of the best super speedway racers in the field. He, of course, has won a Daytona before, back in 2019 in the summer race, which was a little bit controversial. Justin Haley is also working with Rodney Childers, which I think is a pretty big asset for him going into 2025. I think Haley has a shot. We'll see what Spire Motorsports can bring to the table for Justin Haley. Up next, how about the 8 car for Richard Childress Racing? This will once again be driven by Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch is going into this year's Daytona 500 probably as the favorite to win, and my current pick to win the 2025 Daytona 500. He is a really solid super speedway racer, and since joining RCR, he has been one of the strongest super speedway racers in the field. And the last time we ran here at Daytona, he came very close to winning and got beat on the last lap before Harrison Burton got by him at the end of the event. I think Kyle Busch does have a really good opportunity here, and I think he could finally pick up that first Daytona 500 win. He looks to finally get it done with RCR in 2025. Up next, top of the 9 car for Hendrick Motorsports. This will once again be driven by Chase Elliott. Chase Elliott has won multiple super speedway races before in NASCAR Cup Series competition. Multiple races, of course, that being at Talladega back in 2022 and also in 2019. He also won a stage, of course, in 2024 at the Daytona 500. And I do think that Chase Elliott will be fast and capable enough to get a Daytona 500 win. If Hendrick could bring the pace and speed that I think they're really looking to get, I think Chase has a really good opportunity to finally win that first Daytona 500 in 2025. Up next, up at the 10 car for Kaulig Racing. This one's going to be driven by Ty Dillon, who joins this team in 2025. This will be the first Daytona 500 that Ty Dillon has competed in, I believe, since 2022, if I'm not mistaken. So it's been a couple of years. I think Ty Dillon's going to struggle a little bit. I think he's an okay super speedway racer at best, but I really don't think he's going to set the world on fire. But it's a good opportunity for him. We'll see what he can do with Kaulig Racing this year. Up next up at the 11 car for Joe Gibbs Racing. This one's going to be driven by Denny Hamlin. Denny Hamlin is looking to pick up his 4th Daytona 500 victory, trying to become only one of 3 drivers who at least has 4 Daytona 500 victories, the other 2 being Cale Yarborough and Richard Petty. Denny Hamlin has not been as strong in the next-gen era of super speedway races, but I think Denny Hamlin does have a chance to get that 4th Daytona 500 win. Now, FedEx will not be with him this year, and same with some other brands going into the year, but Denny Hamlin will look to win his 4th Daytona 500 this year and season. Up next, up the 12th car for Team Penske. This one's going to be driven by Ryan Blaney. Ryan Blaney, like Kyle Busch, is one of the big favorites to win the 2025 Daytona 500. He, of course, won back at Daytona in 2021. Has won, I think, 3 or 4 races at Talladega Super Speedway. The Penske cars are always really strong. Ryan Blaney's led a ton of laps at Super Speedways in his NASCAR Cup career and looks to finally get that first Daytona 500 win, which would be pretty big for his career. I think Ryan Blaney's got a really good chance and opportunity to finally win the Daytona 500. Up next up the 13 car for Kaulig Racing. It doesn't fully sound like the Kaulig Racing car is a full possibility for the Daytona 500 at this point. If this car does show up for the Daytona 500, I would think Christian Eckes or Daniel Dye are likely the favorites to get behind the wheel. But as of right now, this one is a big question mark going into the Daytona 500. If they do show up, I think it'll be Eckes or Dye behind the wheel of the seat this year. Up next up at the 15 car for Rick Ware Racing. Now this car is not announced their driver completely for 2025 for the Daytona 500. Some candidates that I could see behind the wheel are Sheldon Creed, Corey LaJoie, Sam Mayer, and Harrison Burton. Now the NASCAR Rumor Nostalgia account put it out, and it sounds like that Corey LaJoie may be the favorite for the 15. According to the NASCAR Rumor Nostalgia account, we know LaJoie will not be full-time with Rick Ware, but it sounds like there might have been a deal struck at this point, and I think that Corey LaJoie is probably the favorite for the seat, but I would not rule out Sheldon Creed, Sam Mayer, or Harrison Burton getting behind the wheel. Up next up the 16 car for Kaulig Racing. This will be driven by AJ Allmendinger, who will be back full-time with Kaulig Racing in the Cup Series in 2025. AJ did run the 500 last year and actually led quite a few laps in the second half of the event. And AJ, of course, has won at Talladega in NASCAR's Xfinity Series competition. I think AJ does have a decent chance here, unlike his teammate Ty Dillon. I really think he's going to have a car strong enough to be up front. He'll look to finally get that first Daytona 500 win, get his first Cup Super Speedway victory, and win, I believe, would be his 4th career NASCAR Cup Series race. Up next up with the 17 car for RFK Racing. This one's going to be driven by Chris Buescher. Since joining RFK Racing, Chris Buescher has been one of the strongest super speedway racers in the field. He won the summer race at Daytona in 2023, and Chris Buescher has been up front at most super speedways, so he did struggle a little bit in 2024. But I think Chris Buescher is going to have a solid opportunity and chance here, and I think he could potentially get that first Daytona 500 win later this year. Up next up the 19 car for Joe Gibbs Racing. This will be driven by Chase Briscoe, who joins the 19 team and replaces Martin Truex Jr., who we'll talk about a little bit later. Chase Briscoe has been pretty good at super speedways. Actually, when he drove for Stewart-Haas Racing, is qualified up front at those races as well. I think the JGR cars have had solid race pace at this track. I don't know if it'll qualify very well, but I think Briscoe will have a car capable enough to run with some good speed later this year and season at the 2025 Daytona 500. Up next, up with the 20 car for Joe Gibbs Racing. This one's going to be driven by Christopher Bell. I didn't think Bell a couple years ago was that great of a super speedway racer. However, recently Christopher Bell, especially in the last year or so, has been pretty good. He actually won a dual race in 2024, and he's rejuvenated. He's coming off of winning the Tulsa Shootout. He's got a really good opportunity to win the Chili Bowl Nationals later this weekend. I think Christopher Bell is going to be very, very competitive at this year's Daytona 500. He's got a car capable of getting up front. I think he could potentially have an opportunity to win his first Daytona 500 in 2025. Up next up with the 21 car for the Wood Brothers. There'll be a new driver behind the wheel of this car for 2025 as Josh Berry replaces Harrison Burton, who goes back down to the NASCAR Xfinity Series to replace Hailie Deegan. I think that Josh Berry, who I think had some really strong speed at Daytona the last time we ran here, could be a sleeper pick to win the Daytona 500, considering he's going to be in the car that won at Daytona the last time we were here. I look for Josh Berry to be pretty fast and pretty quick at this year's Daytona 500 with the Wood Brothers. Up next up with the 22 car for Team Penske. This one once again be driven by Joey Logano. Joey Logano comes into this year's Daytona 500 as a defending NASCAR Cup Series champion. Now, Joey's one of the best super speedway racers. It's been a couple years since Joey Logano won a traditional super speedway, and it's been a decade since he won the Daytona 500. But I think Logano's going to be one of the favorites. If Penske can bring the pace and speed like I think they're going to, I think Joey Logano does have a really good opportunity and chance to win his second Daytona 500 in 2025. Up next up with the 23 car for 23XI Racing. This will once again be driven by Bubba Wallace. Bubba Wallace is coming off having a pretty solid year in NASCAR Cup competition and came close to winning the Daytona 500 in 2022 and also in 2024. I think Bubba's going to be one of the favorites to win the Daytona 500 this year as he's been very, very good at super speedways over the years. So I think Bubba's got a good opportunity. He's going to have a new crew chief this year, and Toyota is going to be a lot stronger with their program in 2025, including, I think, qualifying as well. Up next up with the 24 car for Hendrick Motorsports. This will once again be driven by William Byron. Now, William Byron is coming into this year's Daytona 500 as a defending Daytona 500 winner and looks to be the first person to go back-to-back in the Daytona 500 since Denny Hamlin did it in 2019 and 2020. William Byron's been really good at super speedways. Has won, of course, 2 races at Daytona and also has won a couple races at Atlanta as well. I think Byron's got a really good opportunity to get his second Daytona 500 win and victory. Up next up with the 33 car for Richard Childress Racing. While this has not been officially announced and confirmed, we do think that RCR is going to likely enter a car in this year's Daytona 500. I think it comes down between Austin Hill and Jesse Love. I don't think Will Brown's going to truck from Australia to run the Daytona 500. So at this moment in time, I'm leaning toward Austin Hill. I think RCR does enter a car in the 500, a third car, especially with Andy Street being the crew chief. I'm going to go with Austin Hill being the driver of this car. Up next up with the 34 car for Front Row Motorsports. This will be driven by Todd Gillen, who moves over from the 38 to the 34 in 2025. Todd Gillen, very fast at qualifying as super speedways and led a ton of laps as super speedways this past year. I think Todd Gillen does have a realistic chance to get that first Daytona 500 win. It's been 4 years since the 34 car went to victory lane with Michael McDowell. I think Todd Gillen will have the pace and speed to potentially get that first Daytona 500 victory. Up next up with the 35 car for 23XI Racing. This will be driven by Riley Herbst, who moves up to the NASCAR Cup Series full-time with 23XI Racing in 2025. Now, Riley Herbst, in my opinion, is a pretty underrated super speedway racer. Has shown a lot of really strong speed in NASCAR Xfinity Series competition when he drove for Stewart Haas Racing. And I think he does have a solid chance and a really good opportunity to run up front this year as he looks to win his first career NASCAR Cup Series event with 23XI in the 2025 Daytona 500. Up next up with the 36 car for Front Row Motorsports. Now this one's a little bit up in the air currently at the moment, and I'm not entirely sure if they're going to see the 36 car. But if they do show up at this year's Daytona 500, the Front Row team, I think Chandler Smith's the driver. He's joining the team full-time in truck competition. I don't think Lane Riggs is going to move up. So if they do show up, I'm leaning toward Chandler Smith being the driver of this seat for 2025 in the 500. Up next up with the 38 car for Front Row Motorsports. After months of speculation, it was finally confirmed that Zane Smith would be the driver of the number 38 car for Front Row. Zane Smith won a Daytona in the Truck Series in 2022 and 2023, and I can see Zane Smith being an underdog pick for this year's Daytona 500. I think he's going to have a car capable of getting it done, and I think he does have a chance to potentially win his first career NASCAR Cup event in the 2025 Daytona 500. Up next, how about the 40 car for Junior Motorsports? Yes, you heard that right. It was confirmed earlier this afternoon that Junior Motorsports is entering the 2025 Daytona 500 with Justin Allgaier behind the wheel of the car. They are going to have a partnership with Chris Stapleton as well, who will be a part owner of this car in 2025. To see the Junior Motorsports is going NASCAR Cup racing for the first time is really, really exciting. Allgaier is also a pretty good super speedway racer. He will look to try to win the Daytona 500 and make the field as well. Up next, up with the 41 car for the Haas factory team. This will be driven by Cole Custer, who moves up to the NASCAR Cup Series in 2025. I think Cole Custer is going to have a decent chance here. He's been solid at super speedways, and the Fords are generally really fast at these tracks. Plus, this is going to be an RFK racing car at heart. So we'll see what Cole Custer can do as he'll drive the 41 car for the Haas factory team and organization in 2025. Up next, up with the 42 car for Legacy Motor Club. This will be driven by John Hunter Nemechek once again. Now, John Hunter, I'm not really sure what I expect from him. He has won in Atlanta in Xfinity Series competition, but with Legacy, I just really don't know. I think Nemechek's one of those big question marks on threats to win. I'm not going to put him down as a major candidate, and I think he could end up having a little bit of struggles and not having the pace and speed to contend in this year's Daytona 500 with Legacy Motor Club this year. Up next, up with the 43 car for Legacy Motor Club. This will once again be driven by Eric Jones. Now, unlike John Hunter, I have more confidence in Eric Jones. Eric Jones has won at Daytona before, that being back in 2018, and Eric Jones actually had really good speed at super speedways last year as he got the high line moving quite a bit through the year. I think Eric Jones could be a sleeper pick to win the Daytona 500. He's been good at this track in the past, and Legacy is kind of going into this year with a team that struggled in 2024. I think Eric Jones does have a chance and opportunity to show some really solid speed in the 2025 Daytona 500. Up next, up with the 44 car for NY Racing. This will be driven by JJ Yeley, who will be back in this car for a ton of races in 2025. Jay Guy is also expected to be the crew chief of this car. Now, JJ Yeley, I think, has got a decent chance. He came very close to making the Daytona 500 in 2024. And I think he does have a solid chance and opportunity to potentially make the Daytona 500 with this team in 2025. Up next, up with the 45 car for 2311 Racing. This will once again be driven by Tyler Reddick. Now, Tyler Reddick, I haven't always rated as a super speedway racer. However, he did win at Talladega in 2024. And Reddick, to be fair, has been getting better at super speedways over the course of the last couple of years. I look for Tyler Reddick to be an underdog to win the 500 this year. 2011's got a really strong super speedway program for the most part, and I think that Tyler Reddick and the number 45 team are going to look to try to win their first Daytona 500 in 2025. Up next, up with the 47 car for Hayek Motorsports. This will once again be driven by Ricky Stenhouse Jr. The only difference is the name has changed from JTG to Hayek Motorsports. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is looking to pick up a second Daytona 500 win in 2025 as he won it back in 2023. Stenhouse is going to be one of the guys that could be a borderline contender to win. We know he's a really strong super speedway racer. I think Ricky Stenhouse Jr. does have a really solid chance and a really great opportunity to potentially win his second Daytona 500 with Hayek Motorsports in 2025. Up next, up with the 48 car for Hendrick Motorsports. This will once again be driven by Alex Bowman. We know Alex Bowman came very close to winning the Daytona 500 in 2024, and there was some controversy around the win, even though it was pretty clear that William Byron was the guy who won coming across the line. I think Alex Bowman has a good chance to win this year's 500. He's going to qualify pretty well. They may sacrifice for some of the race pace and speed, but I really think that Alex Bowman and the 48 team are looking for vengeance, and Bowman will be one of the guys to watch out for in the 2025 Daytona 500. Up next, up with the 50 car for Team Amerivent Racing. This team is a little bit up in the air currently at the moment right now. This team may not show up. If they do show up to the Daytona 500, I'm leaning toward Jeb Burton being the driver. I know he's a little frustrated with the way things kind of ended at the end when he drove it for them at Phoenix. I think there's a chance they do show up, but it seems a little bit unlikely. We're not sure if they will show up at this year's Daytona 500, the Team Amerivent team. Up next, up with the 51 car for Rick Ware Racing. It was officially confirmed earlier today that Cody Ware will drive the 51 car full-time for Rick Ware in 2025. While I'm not expecting much from Cody Ware this season, I gotta say I think he could be an underdog for a good run. He finished in the top 5 at Daytona the last time we were here, and to be fair, had some solid pace and really good speed. I could see Cody Ware contending for a top 10 and running at a pretty decent position. We'll see what Cody Ware can do, and we'll see if he can have a really good opportunity and a really strong chance as he looks to try to win his first Daytona 500 in 2025 with the Rick Ware Racing team. Up next, up with the 54 car for Joe Gibbs Racing. This will once again be driven by Ty Gibbs. Ty Gibbs will look to win his first NASCAR Cup Series race in his first ever Daytona 500 in 2025. Now, Ty Gibbs, I don't think is the best super speedway racer in the field. He generally doesn't run that great at super speedways, but he looks to have a really good opportunity here and will look to try to win his first Cup race, which will be coming up to his third full-time season. He looks to win his first Daytona 500 with JGR in 2025. Up next, up with the 56 car for Tricon Garage. Tricon Garage is expected to enter car in this year's Daytona 500 for Martin Truex Jr. I know that David Gillen's kind of ruled that out, but I don't think that's true what David Gillen said. The number I think that he is going to use is the number 56, and Cole Pearn I expect to be the crew chief. The 56 has not been in the NASCAR Cup Series for a few years. I think that's a number they will inevitably end up using for Martin Truex Jr. I think it's going to happen. I think that Tricon will field a car for Martin Truex Jr. in the 2025 Daytona 500. Up next, up with the 60 car for RFK Racing. This will be driven by Ryan Preece, who joins RFK Racing in 2025 with Derek Finley being the crew chief. Ryan Preece, I think, has been pretty solid at super speedways. Yes, he did have that flip a couple years ago at Daytona, but I really think Ryan Preece could be an underdog pick to run very, very well. I think the RFK cars are going to be very fast and really, really strong. And I think Ryan Preece does have a solid chance and opportunity to get his first Daytona 500 win in 2025. Up next, up the 62 car for Beer Motorsports. This was confirmed this past week. Anthony Alfredo will drive the 62 car for Beer Motorsports in the 2025 Daytona 500 for the second year in a row, because he drove this car at Daytona in 2024 and actually ran quite well and has been pretty good at super speedways in the past. I look for Anthony to have some solid pace and really strong speed. I think he's got a good opportunity here to make the 2025 Daytona 500. Up next, up at the 66 car for NBM Motorsports. This team is expected to enter the Daytona 500. Originally, they were going to have Mike Wallace behind the wheel of this car. However, Mike Wallace was denied very recently. If you checked out his Facebook post, he is very frustrated with how things were handled. Now they're going to have to try to find a funded driver. Timmy Hill would make the most sense to get behind the wheel, but I think other drivers like Sheldon Creed, Sam Mayer, and Harrison Burton too could be major candidates for this seat, so we'll see what happens there, but they're looking for a new driver to get behind the wheel of this seat for the 500. Up next, up the 67 car for 2311 Racing. Now, this ride is very likely off the table at this point. I don't think that 2311 is going to field the car if Martin Truex Jr. no longer available. If they do enter a car in the Daytona 500, I predict that most likely Eric Almirola could end up being the driver, since Almirola, I think, is still interested in running NASCAR at this point. It's kind of unknown right now, but I think there's a chance we could still see a 2311 car. Up next, up with the 71 car for Spire Motorsports. Be a new driver behind the wheel of this car for 2025, that being Michael McDowell. Michael McDowell has won the Daytona 500 before, back in 2021, and looks to win basically his first start with Spire, looks to win with them. McDowell, I think, is going to have a solid opportunity here. I don't know how the Spire cars are going to be, however, but I do think that McDowell could have a solid chance and opportunities. I think he will be a major threat and a factor to get his second Daytona 500 victory in 2025 with Spire. Up next on the 74 car for Spire Motorsports. This one is also up in the air currently at the moment right now. I'm not sure if Spire is going to enter a fourth car. I do think if they do enter a car, I could see it being Raja Karib for Connor Zilch being the driver, or maybe someone like a veteran like a Kaz Gralla perhaps getting behind the wheel. It won't be Corey LaJoie, however, as LaJoie is out of the team altogether. So I think if they do enter the 74, I think it'll be with Karib or Connor Zilch, in my opinion, for the 500. Up next, up at a 77 car for Spire Motorsports. This is once again be driven by Carson Hocevar. Carson Osbar is coming off having a really strong rookie season in 2024 and is looking to win his first career NASCAR Cup Series race in the Daytona 500. I think Hocevar has a solid shot. Last year did not go so well for him. He unfortunately ended up crashing and getting involved in a wrecking incident. I don't think that's going to happen this time around, though, as I do think that Carson Hocevar is a much better driver now, and I think he'll run pretty solid and show some good speed in the 2025 Daytona 500 with the Spire Motorsports team and the Spire Motorsports organization. Up next, how about a 78 car for Live Fast Motorsports? This has been confirmed. Live Fast Motorsports will enter a car in the 2025 Daytona 500, and BJ McLeod, as expected, is going to be the driver. BJ showed some really good speed and came very close to making the 2024 Daytona 500, just came up short. I think BJ could be a sleeper pick to make it. I think he's going to have the pace and speed to contend, and I think that the cars he gets and the engines he gets will help him out quite a bit. So I look for BJ to be fast, and I think he's got a chance to make the 2025 Daytona 500. Up next, how about the 84 car for Legacy Motor Club? While this has not been officially announced, we do expect that Jimmy Johnson is going to enter the Daytona 500 once again in 2025. Jimmy will be 50 years old by the end of this year, so it's not known at this point if this could be Jimmy's last Daytona 500, but Jimmy looks to make the 500 like he did in 2024 and 2023 as well. We'll see what Jimmy Johnson can do, as like I said, he'll be with this team for the Daytona 500 in 2025. Up next, how about the 88 car for Trackhouse Racing? This will be driven by Shane Van Gisbergen, who will make his Daytona 500 debut this year. Shane Van Gisbergen is going to be a sleeper pick in my opinion. He was pretty solid in NASCAR's Xfinity Series competition, and Trackhouse Racing has shown some really solid speed and some pretty good speed in the past when it comes to Daytona 500s. I think that Shane could be a really strong contender and a threat, and I can see SVG having a good chance with the Trackhouse Racing team, with them maybe getting help from Junior Motorsports as well in a way. I look for SVG to be pretty quick in the 2025 Daytona 500 with Trackhouse. Up next, up the 91 car for Trackhouse Racing, aka the Project 91 car. This car will enter the 2025 Daytona 500 with Elio Castroneves. Elio Castroneves, who is a four-time Indianapolis 500 winner, will run the ARCA race on Saturday afternoon to get some experience in a stock car. Now, Elio Castroneves, I think, has a really, regardless if he has the pace or speed, he is guaranteed in the Daytona 500 with the new provisional clause that is going to be coming into play. If he do get the provisional clause that comes into effect, we will have a 41-car field in this year's Daytona 500. If he qualifies in on speed, however, we don't have to worry about that and gets all the prize money as well. But he will drive the Project 91 car in the 2025 Daytona 500. And finally, let's talk about the 99 car for Trackhouse Racing. This will once again be driven by Daniel Suarez. Now, Daniel Suarez has not had the greatest stats in the Daytona 500. However, Daniel Suarez has been pretty good at super speedways, as he did win in Atlanta in 2024. I could see Suarez having a solid opportunity here, especially with Trackhouse expanding, having potentially 4 cars in the 500. He looks to win his first Daytona 500, and I think he does have a solid chance and a great opportunity to do that with the Trackhouse Racing team and org in 2025. So, that is the updated look to the 2025 Daytona 500 entry list. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on soon if I win a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Let's go below that and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. What are your thoughts about the interest? Let me know it in the comments below. The next time we're going to see a Daytona 500 interest update will probably be coming later this month, or probably once we get around to the Daytona 500 week. We're going to have a news video dropping. We've had a lot of news coming over the course of the last couple days. We'll talk about Junior Motorsports entering the Daytona 500 again. Cletus McFarland entering the race. We'll talk about people like Haley Deegan, Connor Zillis, Shane Van Gisbergen, Carl Edwards, Kurt Busch, all this stuff. Matt DiBenedetto, Frankie Muniz, you name it. And other big stuff like Eric Almirola, Sam Mayer, all this stuff too coming very, very soon. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.